It's ever ready. It's ever ready. Why we don't have competition, I don't know. Okay. Okay, it's your guys' fault. You know, I do not like to touch the theological pool. Okay, if we were doing a theological class, they're not like what you expect. Most of the time, you've not been taught theology. You've been taught. Well, you've been taught, right? Doctrine. There's a huge difference. I have an actual class that I teach you difference between theology and doctrine. I don't know if you're going to be surprised, or I hope you'll be pleased, but this may or may not be what you're used to in looking at different things. But I said that I'd do it because I think it makes reasonable sense, especially in looking at the Adamic covenants. We haven't finished with the Adamic covenants, so we kind of need to get there from here. In any case, I told you that we would ask, and I put it down on the paper. The specific question, and we're going to do a logical argument. And I should have done other words of the day. I kind of realized that at the last minute. And I'll talk about them. But I put the same words of the day because we didn't finish them. You just have to remember them. I'll bring them back up to you as we go through it. But theology is the study, the logical study, the study of God, right? Theology. Philosophy is the study of, it's the study of what man can know. We know that. That's philosophy. Theology is the study of God, and it's logical study of God. And so, to study God, what do you have to use primarily? A logical argument, right? The logic. You have the scientific method. The scientific method can support proof of God, but can you prove God, particularly with the scientific method? It's for repeatable events, so kind of ish. It can support it, but it really can't prove it. Can you use history to prove God? Well, actually, you can. If you have if the veracity of your documents prove it, but we have a little issue, right? The little issue with the Torah and with the Tanakh specifically. We don't have the issue with the New Testament. So you can hang your hat on the New Testament history without a problem. But we have a little problem with the Old Testament. It's the equal to, unless you play some other, historical things like, the Sephir, the Mashereth, the Shafir, the scribe, right? Then it becomes more, you can see why it has higher veracity. But we also have a problem with chapter 22 and before. The reason is because, and we are going to get more into this. It's not a bumper sticker. You can't do this as a bumper sticker. I can't just throw out stuff to you and you can quote it and go, oh, well, this is the way it is. No, it's like theology. If I were teaching you an absolute theology class, we would start just like we did with veracity and begin at the beginning, right? And you're going to see that. I'm going to show you some of this. But because we didn't start at the beginning, what do you think we're going to have a problem with? Well, we'll see. We'll see. You'll get it. It'll be obvious. In any case, so the question we want to ask is specifically who created evil? That's the logical question. So I put up some words here to help us, but we are going to have to do some things, do a logical argument. First of all, the word malach. Malach is the word translated angel in Hebrew. The problem with this word is the same problem we have with angelos in Greek. Angelos in Greek means a messenger. Well, the word malach in Hebrew means a messenger. Usually it's malach parna. Anyway, if it means the messenger from the presence of God, it's malach parna, or malach Yahweh, or malach Adonai. You always have to have a determinant to know if it's really an angel as opposed to a messenger. And if it's not in context, you have a problem. Is it a human messenger? Remember Hebrews? I argue that every single one of those uses of angel was a human messenger. It had nothing to do with angels. It just makes us look silly as Christians when we try to defend stuff that's undefensible. In the Greek, it's messenger. Well, you have the same problem in Hebrew, because the word malach is the one translated angel, but it means messenger. So what messenger? The other one is over here, Satan. Satan means accuser. I didn't redefine God because we went through God, and we'll be bringing up God a lot. But Satan, I didn't bring up devil. Why didn't I bring up devil? You guys know. Devil is only found in one, well, the word Satan, Satan, is found in the Tanakh and the Torah. The word devil is only found in the New Testament. Devil means diablo, which it means diabola. A diabola. A diabola. A diabola. There are parabolas, and there are hyperbolas. Hyperbola. And there's some other bolas. But we know that a parabola is a logical argument that it is a description in Greek of a logical argument that has how many telesis? One. A parabola is a logical argument that has how many telesis? Many or infinite? Huh? Oh, hyperbola, yeah. Diabola means a logical argument that has how many? Zero. Zero. This word is usually, and Jesus is a master of irony. And so what we do is we take diabola and we turn it from a logical Greek idea into a demon. And it's not. As a matter of fact, the word Satan is used in the New Testament also. So, we would have to do a huge study on this to find out. So this comes back to our problem, or a problem, because when we do a logical argument, and I also mentioned this, Yetzer Hara, we'll talk about what this has to do with things, but in any case, when you do a logical argument, we have to start with, I think I'll use a different color. We start with definitions. Definitions. And we need to have assumptions. And then we go to your argument. And then we have the conclusion. Always. So, A, B, and C are real numbers. The argument. A equals B, and B equals C. Then A equals, and the conclusion is A equals C. These are definitions. The assumptions are the equal, the other stuff, that we would do as assumptions. But this is a logical argument simply done in, and you guys remember it's from your geometry, right? So anyway, you start with definitions, assumptions. In this case, let's start with some assumptions. Number one, we are going to assume that there is God. Now, if this were a real theology class, what would we have to do? We'd have to prove it, right? But will you guys all go with me that assume there is a God? Okay? Immanuel Kant proved it. We'd have to go. This gets really deep. You have to prove your stuff. That's why philosophy and theology are not stuff that you go trippingly into. And I bet maybe some of you have had theology classes. Very few people really have had true theology classes. If you have a true theology class, the first thing you start with is the definitions. You define God. There's another thing we have to assume, and that is humans, right? Human. You say, well, that's a given. No, nothing is ever given in philosophy or theology. What is human? What is human? You got to have 32 chromosome pairs, right? You got to have, there are things that define human. If we were doing truly a theology class, we would define human. However, I will ask you, may we assume that human is defined by, at this point, Adam and Eve, right? Adam being the XY and Eve being the XX. All right?
It's
23. Is it 30, 20? Okay, I got it back. 23. Anyway. To be a human, you have to have 23 chromosome pairs. Sometimes you can have duplicates, but you have 23 human chromosome pairs, and that makes you a human being. In any case, you define these things, right? The other thing we need to define is, for example, what is Satan? What is evil? We're going to have to go into that. Actually, we're going to define that itself. Assumption. What is the basis for our argument? Remember, there are paradigms. Again, this gets really deep. We have a legal paradigm. We have a historical paradigm. We have a scientific paradigm. We have a logical paradigm. Anybody else remember the other paradigms we can have? We have a biblical paradigm. Let's make an assumption. Let's start with the biblical paradigm. In the biblical paradigm, that doesn't mean we're going to exclude these others. We'll use them to help support our arguments. But if we start in a paradigm, you stick in a paradigm. You can use supporting evidence from other paradigms, but this is where it gets difficult. So, a biblical paradigm. So if I have a biblical paradigm, I have basically 3 parts. Actually, I have 66 parts. How many total? Anyway, every book is a different book in the Bible, but let us go ahead and do it this way. We have the Torah, we have the Tanakh, and we have the New Testament. Most specifically, we should stick with the Torah, maybe let in a little bit from the Tanakh. I'm going to allow some from the New Testament, okay, just because. The problem is this. What have we not proven about the Bible yet? We proved the veracity and looked at the veracity of the text. But what have we not looked at? Something that you guys love. Well, not necessarily you guys, but something we as Lutherans love and we as Christians love. Something that's not acceptable by everybody else. Divine inspiration. You see, the problem is that we've talked about it before. You know, a Hindi is going to tell you that divine inspiration is in the Bhagavad Gita, and there's divine inspiration in the Quran. So it becomes a very difficult thing. However, we are looking at a Jewish paradigm. In a Jewish paradigm, therefore, the Jews accept that the Torah and the Tanakh are inspired. As a matter of fact, the Christians do too. The New Testament says specifically that the Old Testament documents are inspired. By the way, what are we missing in the Torah and Tanakh of the Old Testament documents that are inspired according to the New Testament? The apocryphal documents. Apocryphal documents because, now by the way, is there anything that says the New Testament documents are inspired? Timothy is written about the Old Testament documents because the documents of the New Testament did not exist when Timothy was written. Yes, sir?
I think the Roman Church says that the New Testament is historical, not inspired.
That is correct. The Catholic, I do not know what the Orthodox position is, but the Catholic position is they are not inspired, they are historical. The people that started this whole thing about inspiration of the New Testament was the Reformation. It wasn't just Martin Luther, it was a whole group. There's a problem with that, but that's okay. Let's assume. Yes, ma'am?
Can you extrapolate from when Jesus said to the apostles, I will send you the Holy Spirit and he will recall to mind everything that I taught you? So on, so like it came from Jesus and it came from the Holy Spirit?
That's okay, but the problem you have is, if it's historical, it's fact. If it's not historical, it's inspired, then it's Bhagavad Gita. So take your pick. The Catholic Church accepts it as historical fact, so does the Orthodox.
Well, why can't it be both, inspired and historical?
Because it's not inspired to those who are not Christians, right? So this is an assumption. I will ask you to make a presumption that the Torah, the Tanakh, and the apocryphal documents are inspired. If they're inspired, that means they're the Word of God, which means that they are viable in discussing this theological topic. If you don't agree with that, then we're going to have to look at the Bhagavad Gita, at the Quran, at other sources. But I would argue, I would say that since we're talking about the Christian God, or about the Judaic God, about Yahweh, then let's stick to those sources. Now, we can include the why can we include the New Testament if we want? Well, not only it quotes, well, so does the Quran, or tries to. But the reason we can is because the Teen Hodos, which was the writers of the New Testament, were a sect of Judaism. They're a sect of Judaism. So therefore, this Judaic sect accepted the inspiration of these scriptures. So, our assumption, we can make an assumption, but you're going to have to agree. Do you agree that we can accept as an assumption that we will use the Torah and the Tanakh? We can throw in the Apocrypha, though I didn't bring it from the Apocrypha. It's got lots of stuff. As a matter of fact, a lot of what we know about angels comes from the Apocrypha. And we can include New Testament. What does that mean we have to exclude? I mentioned the other religious documents, I think, are way out of balance. Do you know where 90% of our knowledge about Satan and evil and the angels and all the other stuff comes from? There are two books. I'll put it over here. Inferno and Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost. Most of our knowledge about Satan, angels, all that stuff comes out of Inferno, Dante's Inferno, and Paradise Lost, which are both poems. One is in Latin and one is in English. In Paradise Lost, in Paradise Lost, specifically, who's the guy who wrote that? Paradise Lost by Milton. What did Milton specifically say? He has a quarto about Satan. He said Satan's name was Lucifer. And he said the angels fell from heaven and all this stuff. Everything you believe about angels and Satan all comes from Paradise Lost. The reason it is because his philosophy or his ideas, his theology came from an itinerant preacher who was not believed by most of the community, but wrote theological documents no one would read, except he read it. So what I'm saying is we need to exclude Dante, and we need to exclude Paradise Lost. Not only because they're fiction, the other things we need to exclude are the Book of Concord. Why? Unless you want to presume it's inspired. Is it inspired? How about Calvin's writings? How about all the other writings about angels and demons and all this stuff, right? Are you going to include, for example, the books about witches? There are books about witches and demons and devils through all the past, right? I would say no. So we have to define our assumptions. And I'm going to define the assumptions of our basis for our facts to be, let us look at the Torah, the Tanakh, the Apocrypha, and we can include the New Testament if we like. Now, we have other problems. And let me see. Other problems, other things. So those are assumptions. We'll see if we hit any others. I think those are the main ones. But definitions. First of all, the definition of God.
Perfect.
I go for that. Well, since he is the what is probably the very first thing we should start with?
Creator. Omnipotent.
telling you guys forever and ever. He is, well, he's four-dimensional. Four-dimensional. Four-dimensional means that he is outside of time. He's infinite. He's outside of time. He is omnipresent, omniscient, because he is outside of time. He sees all of time. He sees everything at once. So therefore, he is a four-dimensional being. That's it. Now you say, perfect. He has to be perfect. Why could he? If he's a four-dimensional being, okay, in the beginning, right, there is the four-dimensional being, and we even had it in our thing. In the beginning, gods, right? And we had the three parts of God. Why can't he not be not perfect? What's your measure? If there's only one, what's your measure? There's nothing to measure it against. If you have gods, multiple gods, multiple four-dimensional beings, then you can have something to measure. But he has to be perfect. Has to be. He has to be infinite. He has to be omniscient, omnipresent, all this other stuff. Perfect, though, I think what you're really meaning is the question of, and I want to put it up here, this gets complicated too, good. The question is, what is good? If you're a four-dimensional being and the only one, what is good? Well, basically everything, right? But yes, you're correct. But if that's what it is, that's all there is. Right? So it must be. So good, in my opinion, is encapsulated in the concept of a four-dimensional being. In other words, a singular four-dimensional being. If you have multiple four-dimensional beings, then you can have a comparison. But what does that mean? You have more than one God, right? And remember, we say God is the plenum of everything. We say God exists in the plenum of everything. This is, again, a theological concept. This gets really complicated stuff. But by saying he's a four-dimensional being, we're presuming not presuming. He has to be. Like, for example, the statement, what is good to a goddess? Or what is good to a god? Whatever the god wants it to be. And we're talking about three-dimensional gods here, not four-dimensional gods. So if you're a singular four-dimensional God, but that also presumes that there is how many gods? One. Now I will ask you to take that as both a definition and assumption. We can go from an assumption there is more than one. That becomes a problem. All right, so we have God. Now we're looking at time. Time is very important. Let me see if I've got it in here. I'm sure somebody has it, but let me look at the time factor. I'm going to put it up here. Let me see. I've got to find my time. Somebody may have to look up Genesis 1:1 for me. I may have to have somebody give me Genesis 1. So I'm going to put up here man, woman, angels, Satan. All right. I've got this part. In the beginning, Elohim, God created singular verb, the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God Elohim, God's Elohim with a singular verb said, let there be light, and was light. God Elohim saw light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the day light, and night whatever, and so and so. Okay, what's 6 say? Anybody got 6 up right there? And what's next? What's 7?
And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse, and it was so.
We can read the whole thing, but let me go to the quick. Is there anywhere in that whole thing that God said he created an angel? What is the first cogent, cognizant being that God created? Man. Okay. The first cogent, cognizant being was created was man. Right here. Number 1. Primo 1 of. What is the next cogent, cognizant being that God created? Woman. We have no idea. There's no place in the Bible that tells us where God created the angels. Now, you can make some presumptions, but I'm not going to ask you to do it because I think it's silly. We could assume that in the beginning, it says in the beginning God created. But it doesn't say God had a bunch of angels helping him or other things helping him. It says only there is Elohim gods, and there is the Ruach of God and the Amar of God. There's no more. It doesn't say God created all these other gods or other things or beings. It just says God created these specific things. Now, you can be a literalist, a figurativist, or a euphemist. A literalist says, there's no way, right? I'm going to go by what it says. And that's why I asked you, are we going to presume that it's inspired? If it's inspired and it doesn't tell us when angels were made, then what do we have to conclude? We don't have to know, but they were likely created. Number one, are they important? Really? If they're so unimportant that God doesn't even tell us about them, they just kind of appear, it means they're not important at all. They're not even meaningful. They are God's servants or messengers, right? They do what he says. We'll talk about that too. But we don't know when they were created. You can make up something and say, well, guess who? Paradise Lost. Made up. They were created at the very beginning, and they were the beginning of creation. And there's a whole bunch of time. By the way, I was asked a question about Yom. Yom in Hebrew doesn't necessarily mean a day. It means a space in time. So I was okay, so what about Yom? Well, the thing is that if you want to go with the idea, which Milton promoted, that God created the heavens and the earth and then waited a long time before he created the rest, we as a church kind of reject that. We go with the 7-day model. But the rabbis do go with the long period of time model, by the way, just so you know. And the 7-day version is kind of a new idea. But
how can it be new, though, when it says there was evening and there was morning, the second day or whatever, so that it actually constrains, it defines what that time period is?
because you can't have evening and morning without a sun. And the sun isn't created until the third day. So, there are issues that we, again, we're talking theology here, right? So I'm not trying to give you any doctrinal ideas or even stick to anything. I'm telling you, this is theology. Theology, we start with assumptions, we do definitions, so we have to go by what we know. We can only go by what we know. So angels are something, we don't know when, they're at least tertiary. And then we got Satan. So, what about Satan? I got the Satan stuff here. All right. The first time we hear about old Satan, let me dig into my notes here. The first time we hear about angels. Angels do not appear until Genesis 16. The first time we hear about angels, let's see. I've got all the angels. The first time we hear about angels is with Hagar. So the angel Lord, this is the first evidence that we have of any angels at all.
Wait, what about the angel who had the flaming sword outside the garden?
It's not an angel. It's a flaming sword. Look at it. What does it say?
Let me see here.
It depends on the translation, but it's not a malach.
He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the truth. So
A cherubim. Okay, I give you the cherubim. What is a cherubim? I mean, we just, is that a type of angel? Or right? We're not moving into the hierarchy of angels, but what is a cherubim exactly? Right? I know what a malach is, a messenger from God to humans. But what's a cherubim? Now we see cherubims in other places. But like I said, I'm not, what is a cherubim? I'm talking about angels here. angels being messengers to man. What is a cherubim, obviously? Is it a messenger to man?
Well, he actually was delivering a message. You're not coming back now.
Well, he's the one that chops you,
Yeah,
Right.
That's a pretty good message.
right? Well, has anyone talked to him? In storybooks, but I haven't talked to him and you haven't either. No one's met this cherubim, and maybe you don't want to. It'd be a bad thing, right? So, I mean, what a cool fiction, but it's a being, and you know, we could add this to our list. Okay, cherubim. Cherubim were obviously created before angels. Or angels before.
Do you want to hear this? Here's a funny thing on Google.
Okay?
In general, all spirit creatures that are or were sons of the true God are called angels. All messenger angels have one set of wings. Cherub is basically an official guardian angel. They mainly guard and protect the interests of God in an official capacity. Now, where they got their information, I have no idea.
I'm going to say let's allow it because we found it in the Torah, right? And the Torah we assume is a document. But we'll get to this in a second because we're talking about definitions. The first time we run into Satan, and by the way, but I said the first time we run into angels are at Hagar. There are no angels unless you include a cherubim, and cherubim is an interesting thing.
Another thing says they're not angels, they're created beings of God and they're never considered angels.
Well, okay, on Malach, for example, where it talks about Hagar, it says, the angel of Yahweh, the Malach, the messenger of Yahweh. Now, it could have been a what? A dude, or a dudette, or somebody, right? It could have been some human being or something other than a spiritual being, right? It just says the Malach of Yahweh. So a Malach of Yahweh could have been a person. Right? I'm just saying. You know, we presume it. The rabbis have written a lot about it. Rabbis are not intrigued by angels, and I don't think we should be either, but that's whatever it is. Let's look at Satan. The first time we see Satan is in Job. No. The first time we see Satan, well, it depends on where you think Job is. Job is probably an earlier document. First time we see him in the order of the Tanakh. He's not in the Torah, but in the Tanakh. Okay? He does not appear in the Torah. Okay? First time we see Satan is 1 Corinthians 21. Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. That's the first time we see it in the order of the documents that we have. Huh? Chronicles. What did I say? Corinthians Chronicles. Okay. In Job, we see, in the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless, upright, he feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons, he owned 7,000 sheep, blah, blah, blah. It goes, see, one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. Okay, according to Job, is Satan an angel? Maybe. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it. The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one, la, la, la. And Satan said, very well, then everything he's done is in your hands, but on the man himself, does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so his flocks and his herds have spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, very well, everything he has is in your hands. But on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out in the presence of the Lord, and Satan did all kinds of bad stuff. And in Job 2 we see, on another day, the angels came to present themselves to the Lord, and Satan also came to them to present himself before him. And by the way, this is evidence of a synopsis body. Okay? The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, I'm roaming through the earth. And the Lord said, have you considered my servant Job? And it's basically a repeat, because it's the beginning of the history or the account of Job. So, that leads us to another thing. Okay? Satan is obviously a quartier 5. We're down to 5 now in created beings. Okay? Now, we have to ask the question, that everyone wants to know. We have to define evil. And evil is not easy to define, so I would like to assume, let's assume that evil equals sin. We can define that easier. What is sin? Contrary to God's will. Exactly. That is correct. Well, kind of.
Intentionally. Because I would say that people do things accidentally too that are not God's will.
Intentional. Well, God didn't say that. We'll see that when we get into the sacrifices. God said even if it's unintentional, right?
Yeah.
It's still sin. So intentional or unintentional, and it is opposite of God's will. Now, in the beginning, there's only God. So everything is good, and everything God made according to the Genesis was good, including man. But in the beginning, God told man one thing. Yep, it's the tree. And he told Adam, he did not tell Eve, he told Adam, right? That was the first covenant. And he said, don't eat in the tree. In other words, you can do anything else, just don't eat of the tree, period. In Job, did Satan sin? Did Satan sin? Well, God told, Satan did what God told him to do.
Or allowed him to do it.
Allowed him to do. Now,
Gave him permission.
With boundaries.
okay, this comes back. We need to define what is man. Man is what? Image of God, but he is first of all a three-dimensional being. Not infinite, not that stuff, right? Created the image of God. The image of God means he is a, well, I'll say sentient. Think. He has suke. He has suke. He thinks, right? But also, no, that's pneuma. According to our Greek, I'm using our Greek intentionally. Think, and free will. Free will. Okay? Because an angel is obviously a what kind of being? Well, three-dimensional, which means, you're right. See, when we use terms like this, like created, what we mean is an angel is a three-dimensional being. It is a being that has sprung from God's creation, that God made himself, right? Humans didn't make him. The world didn't make him. Gay didn't make him. God specifically made him, but they are three-dimensional beings, just like man. Are they in the image of God?
Not that we're told.
Nope. And all we can go by now, Paradise Lost and Paradisio says they are in the image of God, but the Bible, the Torah, does not tell us. Do they think? Do they have suke? Because they're doing what God tells them,
Not
which
necessarily.
is pneuma, free will, right? They don't have free will. I would argue that from what we know, they think, right? They have suke, but they don't have free will.
Yeah, they have to think because people ask them questions and they respond, so.
Exactly. Now, they could be automatons or robots, but they kind of are if they have no free will, right? Okay, Satan. Satan is a three-dimensional. Is he in the image of God? No. Is he thinking? Yeah. Does he have free will? Really? If he can only...
He can choose to do things that are against God's will.
Really? What thing did he do against God's will? Name me anything the devil did against God's will.
See, we only point of
Well,
it.
are
We've
you
been
talking
taught
about just Job or the
in
whole
military.
Bible? 'Cause,
The whole Bible. I'll open it to the whole Bible.
he tempts people.
Okay, is temptation, okay, right? First of all, is Job before Abraham or after Abraham?
We don't know.
We don't know, but we haven't gotten there yet. Is he after Noah? Yes, he's after Noah. We have not talked yet about the Noahic covenant. Okay, we need to get into the Noahic covenant. All you guys are Gentiles, you better know the Noahic covenant, because if you break it, you're done. You're sinning. But the point is this. Number one, is lying a sin? Is tempting a sin? By God's definition.
Because say your way out of it.
You'll say yes? Okay, for example, what is the sin that we call lying? Do not bear false witness.
Well, in the New Testament, when it's talking about when Jesus said if someone causes one of these little ones to sin, it'd be better for him to be thrown around his neck and thrown to the bottom of the sea. Like if you're trying to lead people astray, like we consider people who like teach children things that are wrong, are doing wrong, they're doing evil.
What is it? Now,
Was he testing?
well, remember in the Lord's Prayer we say, lead me not into temptation. And we take that to mean, don't let me be tempted beyond what I can do. The temptation is not a sin. You have free will and temptation. Now is this a definition or an assumption? Well, it depends on where you want to fight this battle.
Tempt somebody, you gotta have a bad thought that you wish an evil.
And God tempts no one, doesn't the Bible say that? So
It's
if
like
that's
God's
not,
too
that's
bad.
contrary to his will, that's not what he does.
But remember, God has free wills. I hate to go. God wills all men to be saved. Will all men be saved? No. So God's will is thwarted. God also has a will that he wills, something to happen. But it doesn't always happen the way God wills it. So therefore God is thwarted. And then there is the big will of God, which is God sees time in 4 dimensions. God knows what is going to be the end. I'm sorry, but God does not get his will. God's will is not done. That's why we pray that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? Because in God's will in heaven, the angels don't have free will and Satan does not have free will. The reason he doesn't have free will, it is not a sin to tempt.
Don't forget what Corinthians 10:13 says.
Yeah.
No temptation has overtaken you except what's common to mankind, and God is faithful; He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. In other words, there is always a way in the face of your temptation to not sin.
Now Jesus calls the devil, or Satan, the father of lies.
Right. He's
But-
a deceiver.
He's a deceiver. Every person who writes a fiction novel is a deceiver. Every person who doesn't tell the absolute truth is a deceiver. If lying were incorrect, then I would be struck dead because everybody gets to a question. Does this look nice? And of course it looks nice because you're not going to ever say anything different. It's an old joke, but it's kind of true, right? We don't sometimes we intentionally insult people, but we don't intentionally insult people, right? From our wives to our friends. But the thing is that the sin is to bear false witness, not to lie. Lying is not a sin, it's bearing false witness. And by the way, we are going to dig into exactly what they mean. I'm telling you, it's not a bumper sticker. This is why theology is so difficult. Because if we want to really discuss theology, we have to define and make assumptions. And again, that's what we're doing in this class, is we're looking at the Torah as a verifiable source of information and seeing what the Jewish rabbis and scholars and others have thought about it. Yes, ma'am, do you have a question? Or
Well,
comment?
just comment. I mean, like 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. So he's trying to harm. And in Revelation, the dragon, which is Satan, he's going about like causing all sorts of harm.
Okay? How can he harm you? As a matter of fact, let me give you a cultural context. Is a roaring lion dangerous? No, because the males are not the ones that are dangerous. It's the females that are dangerous. The female lions hunt, the males roar and make a lot of noise. Yes, sir?
It says it's seeking someone to devour.
Yeah, but see, it's an irony. It's a Greek irony. The Greeks were wonderful about this, and Jesus and all the writers of the Greek New Testament. That's why I warn you, Greek is not English, and we can't make English pronouncements very easily about Greek stuff. So everyone in the Middle East knows about lions. They live around them. And so when you hear a roaring lion, you know, look out for the female. Yeah. As a matter of fact, a roaring lion means they have made a kill. And so they're eating it, right? And he's happy.
And he's warning off others.
Exactly. There are deep cultural notes in this. And so we can't,
So why is Satan and the demons going to be locked in hell forever? Why are they being punished if they haven't done something wrong?
and where did you learn that? That's from Paradise Lost.
In Revelation, it says that they're going to be locked up in hell forever. And do this.
In Revelation, we have some stuff in Revelation. This is one of the reasons that guess who did not like Revelation. Luther said it's an apocryphal book.
Well, and also in Matthew, Jesus said, like, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. So it's
Yep.
right from Jesus' mouth.
I'll go for that. And where did he get his information? Well, the Apocrypha he was reflecting apocryphal information. But I'll go for that, okay? I'll go with the idea that the devil and the angels, Satan and the angels, the fallen angels, right? I'll go for that. They don't, do angels have free will?
How can they fall if they don't have free will? That's what I don't understand.
And here's the answer to that, okay? If God, for example, and this is indeed a logical point, okay? But how can you have a being that is condemned that is not capable of sin? Which is an angel and Satan. You're going to agree, right? Angels, if you agree that they don't have free will, then even Satan's angels can't have free will. Huh?
I don't agree with that. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Well, if they have free will, then they are like man.
How can they fall away if they don't have
Right.
free will?
And the answer is this. God's point in making the angels was totally to be messengers. But Satan and the angels, Satan means accuser. Accuser, for example, of man or of God. And if Satan, let's say, and this I have to agree, comes from extra biblical sources, but it's what we have decided through Christianity and theology. Okay, so the devil and his angels are not opposing God at all. What they didn't like was that God made man with free will in the image of God. And what did man make? In the Bible, in the Torah, who is the first one to break a commandment of God? No, you didn't. Adam. Man, Adam, the XY chromosome dude, he is the one. Did the angel do it? Did the cherubim do it? Did Satan do it? Satan isn't even on the picture. Remember, there's no angels, there's no Satan, there's none of these guys at all. This goes back to a thing. Okay, if we say Satan, for example, created evil. Yes, sir.
So if Satan and the fallen angels didn't like something that God had done, created man.
Yep.
They would have to have had free will in order to not like something that God had done, because otherwise they would like everything that God
Not at all. Not at all. Because, for example, what is the motivation? This goes motivation. If you are a being that's sentient, but without free will. And you see God create, God who is perfect and good and one, and he creates a being that will oppose him and do evil. Right? Because we have already shown perfectly who created evil. Man. Man's the only one. Because the only thing that was against God's will was eating the tree, right? And man did it. Man had a covenant with God, and man did it. Only man, not woman, not Eve. And so man committed that indiscretion against God. So therefore, by our argument, only one person could create evil, and that was man. Man created evil because we said evil equals sin, and he's the first and only to sin in this picture. Yes, sir.
So then the devil and his angels are cast into the lake of fire because they failed their performance evaluation.
That is probably a good way of looking at it. You have something there, Rick?
Okay, Adam sinned.
Right.
The serpent was there in God's perfect garden. What is this talking snake doing now?
He desired Adam and Eve to disobey God. Is that not sin?
He tempted them. Again, it depends. If you want to assume that temptation is equal to sin, which is equal to evil, I think we have another problem here.
But he took action to try to get them to disobey.
That's what all temptation is. You know, a temptation, if I tempt Brett to do something, hey, let's go on down, and I know your wife doesn't want you to go shooting, but let's go shooting, dude. And he says, okay, let's go. Right? And his wife made an edict not to go shooting. Well,
Do you think
I
God
didn't
wants
do
you
it.
to do that, though?
What's that?
Do you think God wants you to do that, though? To try to get him to do what he shouldn't do?
God doesn't necessarily want you to do it, but it's not, like, for example, what did God tell Satan to do to Job?
Anything but
With
couldn't
the
kill him.
boundaries.
And guess what? Satan killed his sons and daughters and destroyed his farm and destroyed his family and gave him diseases, right? Now we see direct evidence that Satan was allowed to do it. Now, here's the question. Did God do it? Well, if you say temptation, God tempted Satan, so God's just broke the law, but he can't. God can't break the law, right? Number one, he made it, so you can't break what you made. I mean, I guess you can, but, you know, the point of the law coming from you. But he allowed Satan to do it. Satan became his messenger, if you like, his malach, in doing stuff that we would consider bad. But like I said, what is bad to a goddess or a god? It's not, because they declare what is right and wrong. The thing is that, can evil come from God? Well, I would argue it can't. God can do evil because he can do anything. But he chooses not to do evil because he has free will and because he is perfect and good, as you guys have said, right? However, man is the only one who can do, well, apparently Satan and the angels, this is the question, are they following God's will or are they following their own will?
Back to, Rick's question about the serpent, it describes it as a crafty, the wild animals.
Right.
It never uses any angelic, fallen angel description about it. It's just, he's a crafty, wild
But
animal.
he was
So then did
thinking to
animals
be
talk?
able to.
And
He had to be a thinking
that
being.
raises the question of, were animals sentient? Could they talk?
Well, okay, you guys can play all that, we can play all kinds of stuff we want. The question is, what did Eve say? Well, okay, the account in Genesis, and I'm not trying to place dispersion on Eve, but the account about it is, okay, the serpent told me. Now you can take that two ways. You can take it literally, figuratively, or you can dig through it, euphemistically. So the Hebrews, some Hebrew scholars think this is completely figurative, or completely literal, She was lying. She lied. The serpent didn't tell her anything. Maybe the serpent was slinking around the tree, and the serpent comes up to the tree, and she thought it was good to eat, and she ate it. And so what did she tell God and Adam? Well, the serpent told me. He spoke to me. Boy, now you got to dig yourself a deeper lie, right? So that is one way it could have happened. We don't know because we don't have witness, right? We don't have witness up to 22. So how are you going to view this? You say, was Eve telling a whopper? Well, I would bet that more than the fact that a serpent, a snake is talking.
Whoever wrote it, however, writes it as if for account, like they write that as the account.
The other side of this question is, and we haven't even gotten to this, we got to get to the second covenant. We'll get there. But the other question about this is, did Eve, if let's say, is this figurative? In other words, is this the reason that they told this? I don't mean figurative about Adam and Eve, but figurative in the sense that it's displaying the point of free will of man, right? And indicating that the image of God and the free will of man, as opposed to, it's not just a creation myth story, it's an account of how this happened in terms of philosophy or theology, right? There's lots of ways of looking at this, and, if you look at it literally, you got to go with literal. If you look at it figuratively, I think we can play more. If you look at it euphemistically, there's even more play.
But he even said that the devil told him, or God told him not to touch the tree, and that's not what the miracle works.
Right. But when we look at the second covenant, we need to look at the second covenant, which we'll do, because we have to get in the covenants. The covenants tell us what is the will of God, right? And so I may not have made a conclusion in your minds. I've tried to give you tools and information, and if you want to talk about it again next week, we can. But like I said, these are difficult things, but this is the first question, well, second question, really, in defining theology. Who, and by the way, we did come to a conclusion. Who created evil? There's only one person. Man had to create evil. That's it. There's nobody else who can do it. So anyway, thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you look after us this week. In your name we pray.
School, I had a rabbi teaching an Old Testament.
Yeah.
I would swear that his theory was